Right at this exact moment, while you're watching this video, there is an American aircraft carrier sailing through the Pacific. 100,000 tons of steel, nearly 5,000 men and women, 70 aircraft ready to take off in minutes. Surrounding it, a strike group of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines forming a shield with a radius of hundreds of miles, a defense system designed to intercept any known threat before it gets close enough to be relevant. The cost of this single ship? $13.3 billion. The cost of its entire battle group over its life cycle? $60 billion. It is the most expensive war machine ever built by humanity. And for decades, no adversary dared to challenge it directly. Because challenging an American aircraft carrier isn't just a military act. It's a declaration that you are willing to die. Now imagine this. In the same Pacific, over 1,000 miles away from that aircraft carrier, a launcher goes into operation. It's not a hypersonic ballistic missile. It's not a fleet of nuclear submarines. It's a drone swarm. 50, 60, maybe 100 small unmanned aerial vehicles, each costing between $10,000 and $50,000. The total cost of the mission? Approximately $2 million. $2 million against $13 billion. It's not a question of superior technology. It's a question of who figured out first that the math has switched sides. Hold on to that image. Because the question this video poses isn't whether China can sink an aircraft carrier. The question is something else entirely, and it's much more disturbing than that. There's a question that Pentagon planners have been quietly asking for years, and in recent months, it has become genuinely urgent. What does it take to render an aircraft carrier useless without sinking it? It's not a rhetorical question. It's not a theoretical exercise. It is the most important question in American strategic planning right now. And the answer piece by piece, number by number, is what I'm going to build with you throughout this video. Let's leave that open for now. The answer comes later. Let's start with what everyone believes. Because what everyone believes is wrong in the most dangerous way possible.
Yes, sir.
The American aircraft carrier went through World War II as the instrument that redefined naval power. It went through the Cold War as the weapon that kept the Soviet Union away from critical sea lanes. It entered the Gulf in 1991 and reshaped what air superiority means. Every crisis, every tension zone, every time Washington needed to project power without firing a single shot, the answer was always the same. Which part of the ocean do you want me to send the aircraft carrier to? For generations, this ship has functioned as a political statement made of steel. There was no direct military response to it. Adversaries developed their forces around the premise that attacking an American aircraft carrier was either technically impossible or strategically suicidal. Maybe both. And then came China, with drones. But here is where conventional analysis completely fails. Because the popular narrative says that China built something more powerful than the aircraft carrier. And that narrative is wrong. China didn't build a superior weapon. China identified that the cost of defending an aircraft carrier has become higher than the cost of attacking it. And that is a completely different distinction. It's not a matter of brute force. It's a matter of arithmetic. Think about it this way. If I can attack you for $2 million, and every time you defend yourself you spend more than that, in the long run, who wins? That is the inversion this video is going to dissect. Because what's at stake isn't just the survival of a ship, it's the validity of an entire strategic doctrine and the credibility of every American military commitment in the world. The problem isn't that China got stronger. The problem is that the United States didn't notice the moment the math switched sides. And once you understand how this math works, you'll understand why American aircraft carriers are already losing a war that hasn't even started yet. I need you to stay until the end of this video. Because there is a specific mechanism, a logic of exchange, a hidden economic engine that is the real weapon behind the drones, and it changes everything. The wrong question is, can China sink an American aircraft carrier? That question matters a lot less than it seems, because sinking 100,000 tons of steel on the high seas is an extraordinary logistical and technical challenge. It requires surgical precision, multiple simultaneous vectors of attack, and a degree of coordination that no navy has tested in actual combat in decades. Sinking the carrier is the hardest goal, and in Chinese doctrine, it's not the primary objective. The right question is different. The right question is, what does it take to render the aircraft carrier incapable of completing its mission? In the world of military strategy, this has a name. It's called a mission kill. You don't eliminate the asset. You eliminate the asset's ability to do what it was sent to do. And a mission kill against an aircraft carrier can be achieved in multiple ways. You can force it to retreat beyond the effective range of its aircraft. You can deplete its defenses until it runs out of interceptors. You can destroy enough aircraft on its deck so that it loses its strike capability. You can simply deny its ability to operate in the target zone without firing a single direct shot at the hull. In all of these scenarios, the aircraft carrier is technically still afloat, but strategically, it's neutralized. Chinese doctrine wasn't designed to sink the carrier. It was designed to force it to retreat, to exhaust its defenses, to turn the most powerful symbol of American might into an object that is present in the ocean, but absent from the theater of conflict. And that distinction changes everything. Because when you understand that the goal isn't destruction, but neutralization, you start to see why a $2 million drone swarm is a far more effective weapon than any precision ballistic missile could ever be. Let's talk numbers, because this is a math problem before it's a technology problem. A standard Missile 6 interceptor, the SM-6, costs roughly $4,300,000 per unit. This is the primary medium to long-range interceptor of the Aegis system, the defense network that protects the carrier strike group from enemy missiles and aircraft. Now, compare that. A small militarized drone capable of striking naval targets can cost between $10,000 and $50,000. The most advanced ones, boasting heavier explosive payloads and swarm coordination capabilities, sit at the top of that range. But most components in a swarm don't need to be sophisticated. They just need to exist in sufficient numbers. Do the math with me. A swarm of 40 drones, each costing $50,000, totals $2 million. $2 million is the cost of less than half of a single SM-6 missile. Now imagine that this swarm is launched against the carrier strike group. The Aegis system has to intercept every single one of those 40 drones before any of them reaches the ship's hull or the aircraft on its deck. Because even a drone carrying a modest explosive payload hitting the flight deck can destroy aircraft, kill crew members, and halt operations for hours or days. So, the Aegis system starts intercepting. SM-6 after SM-6 is fired. $4,300,000 per interception. Against $50,000 drones. And this is where the calculation becomes irreversible. Every successful interception costs 86 times more than the object being destroyed. 86 times. For every drone the system successfully defends against, the American side gets $4,300,000 poorer, while the Chinese side loses only $50,000. Read that again. 86 times more expensive. For every destroyed drone. Now follow the counter. The 40 drone swarm starts closing in. The system fires the first SM-6. $4,300,000 spent. 1 drone destroyed. Second SM-6. $8,600,000 accumulated. 10th, $43 million. 20th, $86 million. 30th, $129 million. If the system fires 1 SM-6 per drone, and the swarm has 40 units, the strike group just spent $172 million defending itself against $2 million worth of drones. An 86-to-1 ratio. And that's just the first swarm. The second swarm cost China the exact same $2 million, but the carrier's magazine now has 30 fewer SM-6s. This goes beyond a conventional war of attrition. It's about a structural cost asymmetry that arithmetic turns into catastrophe at scale. But there's a second layer to this problem, and it's even more critical. The carrier strike group doesn't carry an infinite number of SM-6 missiles. There's a concept called magazine depth, the total number of interceptors available aboard the group's ships before a resupply is needed. When the magazine runs dry, the shield starts to crumble. And resupplying doesn't happen in a matter of hours. In Pacific combat conditions, with logistics routes under threat, restocking precision interceptors can take days or weeks. The last line of defense, then, is the CIWS Phalanx, a rotary cannon system that fires 4,500 rounds per minute at targets reaching close range. It's formidable, but it carries roughly 1,550 round seconds of sustained fire. Against a single drone, or maybe two, that's enough. Against a coordinated swarm of multiple vectors arriving simultaneously? The Phalanx faces the exact same magazine depth equation as the Aegis, just on a scale of seconds, not hours. The reality is this: the most sophisticated system in the world was designed to defend against high-cost threats, not against dozens of small objects flying in coordinated formation. This doesn't represent a system failure, but rather the physical limitation inherent to any defense facing mass attacks by low-cost assets. And Chinese swarm doctrine was designed precisely to exploit that limit. Now let's talk about geometry. Because arithmetic explains why the system fails, geometry explains how. The Aegis system is a layered defense architecture. It tracks, prioritizes, and engages threats in order of estimated danger. First the high-speed ballistic missiles, then the cruise missiles, then the aircraft, and finally the low-altitude targets. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated system, but it has a fundamental design limitation. It processes threats in priority sequence. Prioritization implies triage, and triage implies choice. A well-designed swarm doesn't use this logic. It uses the exact opposite. Imagine that the Aegis system is tracking a threat, or 10, or 20. At some point between 20 and 50 simultaneous targets across multiple vectors, and that exact number is classified, but simulation models indicate it is surprisingly low. The tracking queue begins to saturate. The system can track more than it can engage, and when the engagement capacity is exceeded by the tracking queue, the system enters a forced triage mode. Some targets get through. This is what, in the intelligence world, they call the saturation threshold. The point at which the defense doesn't fail because it was technologically outmatched. It fails because it was mathematically overwhelmed. Now add the vector dimension. A modern swarm doesn't attack in a straight line from a single direction. It is designed to envelop the target, and each attack vector has been calculated to create a different problem for the defending system. Think about the architecture of the attack. Part of the swarm flies in a low-altitude trajectory, 5 meters above the surface of the ocean. At that height, the drones are below the radar horizon of surface systems. The radar cannot see what is that close to the water at relevant distances. This forces the Phalanx CIWS to act at the closest range, when reaction time is measured in fractions of a second, and there is no room for error. At the same time, another set of drones arrives at high altitude, in a diving angle saturating the SM-6Q, and forcing the system to divide its attention between two completely different attack geometries. Some components of the swarm are subsonic, to saturate the engagement time and deplete the magazine. Others arrive faster, forcing interception decisions in compressed time windows. Multiple vectors, multiple altitudes, multiple threat profiles, all simultaneously. And here's the most disturbing element of this geometry. A well-designed swarm doesn't need all its components to hit the target. It just needs the defense to run out of capacity before the swarm runs out of drones. Most of the drones in the swarm are decoys targets that deplete interceptors. Only a fraction needs to get through, and the defensive system cannot know in advance which is which. Use a simple analogy. In a boxing ring, if your opponent can throw 100 punches a minute and you can only block 95, the 5 that get through define the fight. It doesn't matter how well you block. What matters is the marginal capacity. And in the context of a drone swarm, the marginal capacity of the Aegis system was designed to be insufficient by design. Imagine you are inside the combat control room of an American destroyer during a real swarm attack. The tracking screens show 50, 60, 70 dots approaching from multiple directions. The operator has seconds to prioritize. The screens differentiate by altitude and speed, but the threat profiles overlap, a cluster of low-flying dots coming in from the southern sector. These are the 5-meter altitude drones, invisible to surface radar until they are miles away. Another cluster at high altitude coming in from the northern sector. SM-6 is the only answer. Each firing decision is irreversible. One less SM-6, 4.3 million less in the magazine, and new dots keep appearing. The operator knows the magazine has a limit. They know that every SM-6 fired is one that won't be available for the next swarm, and the next swarm could be launched in 20 minutes. Far from being a movie script, this is the exact operational reality that American planners are trying to solve right now. Now let's talk about where all this happens. Because geography is not a neutral backdrop in this story. Geography is the trap. But first, a step back in time. Because China didn't start with drones. It started with missiles. The DF-21D, the so-called carrier killer, is an anti-ship ballistic missile with an approximate range of 1,500 kilometers. When China developed and deployed this system in the 2000s and 2010s, the strategic effect was immediate. American aircraft carriers that once operated 300 or 400 kilometers from the coast began to retreat beyond 1,000 kilometers, because within the 1,500 kilometer range of the DF-21D, an aircraft carrier is a potential target. That was the first sign. The first time China managed to push American naval power out of a critical operating zone without firing a single shot. Now let's switch to the map of the Taiwan Strait. The strait is approximately 180 kilometers at its narrowest point. On the Chinese side, air bases are less than 300 kilometers from the central waterway. This means that any aircraft, drone, or missile leaving mainland Chinese bases reaches the conflict zone in minutes, not hours. Now look at the American side. An aircraft carrier operating out of range of the DF-21D, that is, more than 1,000 kilometers from the coast needs its strike aircraft to fly more than 1,000 kilometers to reach targets in the strait or in Taiwan. An FA-18 Super Hornet has a combat radius of approximately 750 kilometers without aerial refueling. This means that every strike mission requires in-flight refueling, in an environment where refueling aircraft are also high-priority targets. In strategic terms, this is what planners call a range and payload trap. The carrier must stay far away to survive the DF-21D, but by staying far away, its aircraft lose their effective range. Chinese drones and missiles don't face this equation. They launch from land bases at minimal distances. Now add drone swarms to this picture. The DF-21D has already pushed the carrier out of the effective strike zone. Drone swarms now extend the threat into the remaining operational envelope. The carrier falls back. The drones follow. The carrier falls back further. The swarm is relaunched. The geometry of the Taiwan Strait was not created by accident. It was designed through decades of investment in missiles, air bases, and anti-access systems to create exactly this kind of denial zone. It's not a battle China needs to win. It's an architecture that makes the American arrival to the battlefield increasingly expensive before a single shot is even fired. This, in the vocabulary of strategic intelligence, is called A2 Anno Domini Anti-Access and Area Denial. And the Taiwan Strait is the most sophisticated operational laboratory for this doctrine on the planet. Understand the weight of this concept: anti-access and area denial. The entire Pacific is a trap, not by accident, by design. Keep this question in mind. If the Pacific is a trap, what does that mean for all the other theaters where the aircraft carrier is the cornerstone of American deterrence? The answer comes later. And here we reach the most sobering part of this video. Now we're going to talk about what happens when you stop following the headlines and start following the numbers. Because everything we've said so far could be dismissed as speculative analysis, as the interpretation of an outside analyst, as a narrative built on theoretical premises. But that's not what you're about to hear. In 2019, the RAND Corporation, the most influential defense think tank in the United States, largely funded by the Pentagon, published a set of conclusions about high-intensity conflict scenarios in Taiwan. The conclusion was blunt. In the most realistic simulations, American forces were defeated or rendered combat ineffective in the majority of high-intensity scenarios within the first 96 hours of the conflict. 96 hours. 4 days. It's a terrifyingly short window of time. This wasn't the conclusion of a Chinese propaganda institute. It was the conclusion of America's own analytical institutions. The RAND Corporation exists to tell the Pentagon how its forces would perform in actual combat. And what it said was, in Taiwan, in 96 hours, you probably lose. The CSBA, the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, went even further. Its researchers developed and articulated the concept of mosaic warfare. The core idea is this. Instead of concentrating power in expensive, centralized assets like aircraft carriers, the winning doctrine is to distribute lethality across multiple low-cost platforms that are difficult to track individually and impossible to neutralize all at once. This is exactly the swarm logic, articulated as American doctrine, but implemented first by China. The Naval War College conducted tabletop war games that reached similar conclusions. In multiple conflict scenarios in the Western Pacific, the magazine depth of the carrier strike group was depleted before the end of the initial engagement. Not because the systems failed technologically, but because the sheer volume of simultaneous threats exceeded the response capacity of the available magazine. Now the part that nobody mentions in the headlines, there is no real-world live fire test between a modern drone swarm and an aircraft carrier strike group. All that exists are simulations, computer models, and tabletop exercises. That, in itself, is a strategic data point. It means that no nation has tested the actual limit, and that China, rationally, doesn't need to. The American models already confirm the vulnerability. This detail is fundamental. The institutions confirming the structural vulnerability of the aircraft carrier are not Chinese. They are American. And that is the factor that changes everything that comes next. Now let's talk about what this video has really been building toward since the beginning. Because everything you've seen up to this point, the numbers, the geometry, the simulations, is the build-up to one specific revelation. Sit down, because this is the part that changes what all of this means. The real weapon isn't the drone. The drone is the delivery vehicle. The drone is the medium. The real weapon, the mechanism that makes the threat structurally unsolvable, is the exchange rate. It's the economic logic of attrition that makes defending the aircraft carrier mathematically unsustainable, not just in a single battle, but in a prolonged theater-scale campaign over months or years of constant pressure. The difference isn't just in unit cost, you already know that arithmetic. The difference is in replacement time. An SM-6 takes years to manufacture. A swarm drone takes days to replace. Think about the complete mechanics. Raytheon, the manufacturer of the SM-6, produces a few hundred units a year at normal peacetime capacity. In an accelerated wartime production mode, that number increases, but it doesn't multiply by 10 overnight. Supply chains, specialized military-grade electronic components, quality-controlled manufacturing times. All of this limits the speed of resupply. An SM-6 fired today isn't replenished in weeks. Under sustained campaign conditions, the production-to-replacement cycle is measured in months. For some critical components, in years. Now, on the other side, look at the replacement cycle for a swarm drone. Commercial components available on the global market. Assembly in facilities that can be replicated on an industrial scale in weeks. China has a drone manufacturing capacity that is unparalleled in the world. This is verifiable market data. China produces the majority of the planet's civilian drones and has been rapidly converting this production chain into military capability since 2018. The marginal cost of adding more drones to the swarm drops as scale increases. The attacking side can replace losses in days. The defending side cannot. Now project that onto a 6-month campaign. In the first month, the carrier battle group faces 3 saturation swarms. Each swarm consumes 30 SM-6s. The magazine starts to deplete. In months 2 and 3, the pressure is maintained, 2 swarms a week, coordinated with ballistic missile exercises that force the Aegis system to divide its attention. By the 4th month, SM-6 stockpiles in the Pacific Theater hit levels that planners call a critical threshold. In the 5th month, Raytheon is still trying to ramp up production, but the manufacturing cycle hasn't doubled. By the 6th month, battle groups are operating with partially depleted magazines in a theater where the swarm threat is still full scale. China didn't need to sink a carrier, it just needed to keep the pressure on long enough for the arithmetic to do the work. This isn't a future scenario. American aircraft carriers are already operating today in patterns that reflect this equation, pushed out of zones where they operated freely 10 years ago. This creates an imbalance that deepens with every engagement. With every launched swarm, the carrier's magazine gets a little emptier. With every month of a sustained campaign, the balance of power shifts a little more in favor of the attacker. Not because the carrier was destroyed, but because the bill came due. The mechanism destroying the aircraft carrier's invulnerability isn't technological, it's economic. It's a logic of exchange that favors the low-cost attacker against the high-cost defender, and that becomes irreversible on the scale of a prolonged campaign. In the world of strategic intelligence, this has a name. It's called attrition warfare through asymmetric cost. It's not a new concept. It's new as an operational reality applied to an aircraft carrier. Now let's widen the lens, because if the problem were only the Pacific, it would be severe but containable. The problem is that it's not just the Pacific. The American aircraft carrier is the foundation of the entire U.S. global deterrence architecture. Not just in the Pacific, in the Persian Gulf, in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the North Sea. In every zone where the United States makes security commitments to allies, the aircraft carrier is the instrument that makes those commitments credible. And all these aircraft carriers operate on the same platform, with the same Aegis system, with the same magazine depth equation, with the same cost per interception. Iran has watched every RAND publication, every Chinese exercise, every public debate about carrier vulnerability. Iran has drones, it has cruise missiles, it has its own area denial doctrine in the Strait of Hormuz. The scenario repeats itself identically, the same arithmetic, the same geometry, the same saturation threshold, in a different theater, with a different adversary. The equation does not change. Now think about the allies. Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Gulf states. They have all calibrated their security commitments, their defense policies, their military investment decisions on the premise that an American aircraft carrier can and will operate freely in the zones that matter to them. If that premise begins to be questioned, not by an actual attack, but by a series of exercises, publications, and analyses that pile up evidence of structural vulnerability, the calculus of these allies changes. Japan recalculates how much it can rely on the American security umbrella without building independent capacity. South Korea observes the same arithmetic in the context of a North Korean threat that now has regional reach drones. Australia reruns its models on how long it would take for an American response to arrive in sufficient force to the Indo-Pacific. The Gulf states, having watched Venezuela, Iraq, and Afghanistan, silently ask, will the carrier still arrive when we need it? This is what, in the world of strategy, we call a cascading credibility effect. A degradation in the perceived ability to operate the carrier changes the behavior of allies without a single shot being fired. And there is an additional element that amplifies all of this. A conflict in the Pacific that consumes a significant amount of the American precision. Interceptor stockpile leaves other theaters exposed, not because the fleets were destroyed, but because their magazines were drained. The concept planners call a multi-theater resource window, a situation where a regional conflict exhausts the resources needed to respond to a second, simultaneous threat, ceases to be hypothetical, and becomes a calculable operational risk. Pay attention to this math. 2 theaters. Magazines drained. A third theater ignites. What do? It's not a rhetorical question. Pentagon planners are asking it right now. Here we reach the deepest level of this analysis, because everything we've said about drones, geometry, and magazine depth, all of that is the tactical and operational layer. The strategic layer is different, and it's what connects this story to the broader picture of American power in the world. An aircraft carrier's power projection is a form of currency, a currency of deterrence. It doesn't need to be used to have value. Its mere presence in an ocean affects political decisions, diplomatic negotiations, and the behavior of adversaries and allies. It's what international relations theorists call coercive presence, the money that doesn't need to be spent to function as a store of value. The petrodollar system, security commitments in the Gulf, the credibility of alliances in the Asia-Pacific, all these pillars of American power ultimately rest on the perceived ability of an aircraft carrier to get where it needs to get and operate where it needs to operate. When that capability begins to be structurally degraded, not destroyed, degraded, the currency loses value. Not all at once, Gradually, decision by decision, recalibration by recalibration from allies and adversaries making their own calculations. We are facing a process that is already underway. Every RAND publication confirming American vulnerabilities is read in Beijing, in Tehran, in Moscow, in Riyadh. Every drone swarm exercise China conducts in the South China Sea is a calibrated message. Look at what we can do. Look at what it costs. The answer to why the doctrine hasn't changed faster lies in political arithmetic itself. Canceling an aircraft carrier program means admitting that decades of strategic investment were wrong. That carries a political cost no Secretary of Defense wants to pay before a crisis forces the choice. The mechanism isn't a drone, it's a currency, and it's being devalued. This is the most accurate version of what the $2 million swarm is doing against the $13 billion aircraft carrier. It's not an attack. It's a credibility erosion campaign conducted through kinetic means. Real drones, real exercises, real costs, whose ultimate effect is reducing the strategic value of the most expensive asset in American military history. And what is particularly elegant, and particularly disturbing, about this logic is that it works regardless of any actual conflict taking place. The mere demonstration of capability, the mere publication of models, the mere accumulation of evidence that the equation has changed, that, in itself, is already corroding the currency. This proves that economic warfare, conducted through systems logic, has already begun. So let's return to the question this video started with. What happens when the $2 million swarm meets the $13 billion aircraft carrier? The honest answer is this. The aircraft carrier doesn't sink, at least not in a single battle, not with current technology, not in an isolated test. The drone swarm in a single mission probably doesn't destroy the carrier. But that's no longer the right question. The right question is, what does the swarm change about where the carrier can go and what it can do? And the answer to that question changes everything. A carrier that cannot operate within 1,000 kilometers of the Taiwanese coast without facing an unsustainable magazine depth risk is no longer an instrument of theater dominance. It's a limited deterrent force, operating at distances that reduce its combat effectiveness and increase its reliance on logistical resupply under threat. What to watch for as indicators in the coming weeks and months. First, track the U.S. Navy's adoption of the Distributed Maritime Operations Doctrine. If the Navy is accelerating the development of smaller, unmanned, lower-cost platforms to replace or complement carrier battle groups, that's a sign that internal planning has already absorbed the logic of asymmetric costs. Second, watch the next cycle of publications from RAND and the CSBA. The upcoming institutional analyses on Taiwan will reveal whether the 2019 findings have been refined or worsened, and the direction of that refinement is a first-order strategic indicator. Third, monitor the plan's drone integration exercises in the South China Sea. Not the exercise itself, but the scope, coordination, and number of platforms. Every exercise is a data point on the operational maturity level of swarm doctrine. Fourth, look at SM-6 production rates. Any production acceleration announced by Raytheon or contracted by the Department of Defense is a sign that the Pentagon is trying to compensate for the magazine depth deficit projected by the models. And fifth, observe the operational patterns of American aircraft carriers in the Western Pacific. If carriers start consistently operating farther from the Chinese coast than they did 5 years ago, that is silent confirmation that A2 Anno Domini doctrine is working exactly as designed. As of right now, the United States hasn't confirmed any doctrinal changes, nor have they denied that their models are under review. The question of the aircraft carrier's invulnerability isn't a problem for tomorrow. It's an issue for today, and it's not going to be solved by a single battle, a military exercise, or one standalone RAND report. It will be resolved or not by how quickly the United States recognizes that the math has changed, adapting their doctrine before the window of opportunity closes. For now, that window is still open, but it won't stay open forever. The $2 million swarm didn't sink the $13 billion aircraft carrier. It changed the map of where that carrier can operate. And when the map changes, the war is already partially won, before a single shot is even fired. It's not the end of the aircraft carrier, but it is the end of invulnerability as a doctrine. And this story is far from over. Keep watching, stay informed, because the coming months will reveal whether the United States can adapt its doctrine before the map changes completely. And when it does, you'll know exactly what you're looking at.